When Viking armies crushed their enemies, the battle itself was never the end. The true horror began after victory, when their swords were sheathed and mercy vanished. Defeated warriors were left to rot, but their wives faced something far worse: a systematic cycle of humiliation, enslavement, abuse and cruelty that the Vikings perfected during centuries of raids. After every conquest, Viking leaders divided the spoils of war: not just gold, livestock, or weapons, but also human lives. The wives of fallen men were classified as property, ranked by their beauty, age, and strength. Historical records and Norse sagas mention that the most desirable women were kept for chieftains or high-ranking warriors, while others were forced into backbreaking labor or traded as slaves in markets from Scandinavia to the Middle East. When the Vikings conquered a land, the bloodshed of battle was only the first act. What followed was a silent horror, one that fell upon the women left behind. The wives of fallen warriors became the most valuable spoils of war, not because of their worth as people, but because of what they represented: the pride and legacy of the men who had dared to resist. For the Vikings, enslaving a warrior's wife was the ultimate victory. It wasn't just possession, it was humiliation made permanent. A man's defeat was only complete when his home, his bloodline, and his wife were claimed by the conqueror. The woman herself became the evidence of her husband's failure. Historical records from Anglo-Saxon and Frankish sources describe what happened next. The captured wives were seized as thralls, the Norse term for slaves. They were stripped of all rights, renamed by their captors, and forced to forget their origins. In Viking law, they were property. They could be gifted, traded, or killed without consequence. Many were forced into domestic servitude, tending fires, weaving, and serving food in the longhouses of their masters. Others were taken as concubines, forced into sexual slavery to produce children that would strengthen their captors' lineage. These women carried their abusers' children while mourning the families they had lost, a cruelty that tore both body and spirit. The degradation didn't end there. Archaeological evidence shows that Viking captors often branded their slaves, burning marks into the flesh of women to signify ownership. Some were tattooed with pagan symbols or forced to wear iron collars. In the slave markets of Birka, Hedeby, and Dublin, such women were displayed for trade, a living currency in a world ruled by iron and fear. Some captured wives were sacrificed in rituals meant to honor the gods of war. Norse sagas and Arab eyewitness accounts, such as those by the traveler Ahmad ibn Fadlan, describe ceremonies where enslaved women were offered to Odin or Freyr after great victories. These sacrifices were not quick, they were ceremonial and public, seen as proof of loyalty to the gods. Those who survived were forced to abandon their faiths and customs. They were converted to Norse paganism, not by belief, but by terror. They were forbidden to speak their native languages and punished for remembering their pasts. Over time, they became invisible, swallowed by the culture that enslaved them. Genetic studies today reveal traces of their suffering. Many Viking-age skeletons found in Scandinavia belong to women who were not Scandinavian at all. Their DNA links them to Ireland, the British Isles, and Eastern Europe. They were the stolen women of 1,000 conquered villages. Their children grew up Norse, but their mothers' identities vanished. Behind every Viking saga of glory, there was a silent story of captivity, women who lost everything yet built the foundations of Viking society through forced labor and survival. They were the hidden architects of the Viking world, their pain buried beneath legends of valor. The Vikings called it conquest. History remembers it as civilization. But for the wives of the defeated, it was nothing less than erasure, slow, deliberate, and complete. The Viking world was built on ships, steel, and slaves. Behind their tales of exploration and conquest lay an empire of human trafficking so vast that it stretched from the icy fjords of Norway to the deserts of the Middle East. And at the heart of it stood the defeated wives and daughters of fallen warriors, the human currency of Viking power. After every raid, longships returned not just with gold or weapons but with people. Enslaved women were bound, counted, and divided like spoils. Those who weren't kept by their captors were taken to markets that became infamous across the known world: Birka, Hedeby, Koppang, Dublin, and Jorvik. Each one was a hub where lives were priced, bargained, and sold. In these markets, Viking traders displayed captives as merchandise. Written records from Arab and Byzantine travelers describe the scenes: women forced to stand on platforms as men inspected them for youth, beauty, and strength. The strongest fetched the highest prices. Those too old or too broken were sold cheaply for labor or discarded altogether. The slave markets weren't hidden, they were celebrated. The trade in humans was considered an honorable source of income, no different from trading furs or silver. Wealthy Viking chieftains often built their fortunes on this system, filling their halls with servants stolen from conquered lands. In truth, nearly every great Viking settlement owed its prosperity to human misery. The wives of defeated warriors were among the most prized captives. Their status before capture, noble, educated, or of warrior blood, made them valuable trophies. A noblewoman from the British Isles or the Frankish kingdoms could be exchanged for silver, horses, or even entire estates. Some were sold to merchants from the Byzantine Empire or the Arab Caliphate, ending up in places thousands of miles from their homeland, never to see freedom again. Arab historians such as Ibn Fadlan and Ibn Rusta documented the Viking slave routes with chilling clarity. They described long caravans of captives being transported down the Volga River, destined for slave markets in Baghdad and Constantinople. To these buyers, Viking traders brought fair-haired women from the north, women who had once been the wives of warriors, now reduced to nameless property. Archaeological discoveries confirm the scale of this trade. Silver hoards found in Scandinavia contain coins from Persia and the Abbasid Caliphate payment for human lives. In Dublin, remains of chained women were found near trading centers, their bones bearing signs of malnutrition and abuse. Every artifact, every coin, carries the echo of someone's suffering. Even in Viking law, the existence of slaves was so normal that entire codes were written to regulate their sale. A thrall could be branded, beaten, or killed without punishment. A pregnant slave could be sold with her unborn child included in the price. These laws weren't secret, they were public, carved into runestones, and passed down as custom. The same warriors celebrated as explorers and heroes in later centuries were, in reality, slave lords and traffickers. Their conquests weren't just military victories, they were business ventures. The plundering of monasteries and villages across Europe wasn't for food or land, it was for captives. The Viking slave markets created a silent network of suffering that connected continents. For the women captured in war, there was no return, no escape, and no remembrance. Their names disappeared, but their blood flowed through generations that would one day call themselves Norse. They were the invisible foundation of the Viking Age, the broken bodies that carried its wealth, and the forgotten souls that paid the price for its glory.